Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. And I want to speak to you today about a question we have been asked for several months. We've been talking about the Middle East and the Biden-Harris policy for the Middle East and international policy in general. Why is it a big deal? Why is it so important? Why are we focused on this issue and have been reporting about it since January 22nd, when the major news media really hasn't had anything to say? What is this issue all about? We're going to try and answer that for you in the simplest terms that we can to let you understand the importance of what is going on right now in the world. But before we get started, if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, we want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary on this channel. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you, speaking to you anywhere in the world via Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, DLive, basically any of the social media that the internet overlords will allow, to hear your voices through chat and text and phone calls, to hear what you have to say about what's going on in the world, the issues that are affecting us all. Because we believe in the First Amendment, not just for Americans, for everyone in the world, that you have a right to speak, and we want to hear your voice. So please do join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So let's get to the issue. How do we explain this currently? And to make it make sense for people who don't follow international politics, who don't follow the news every day. I think this is perhaps one of the best ways to explain it. Many people may be familiar with the MMA, mixed martial arts. And you may be familiar with this man, Conor McGregor. Now, he's a great fighter, so imagine that you're in a bar and Conor McGregor comes in. Now, you happen to have gone into the bathroom just before he walks into the bar. Everyone sees him. Everyone knows that he's very famous. McGregor is there and he's very proud of his success. And he's somewhat boastful. Someone else comes up to Conor McGregor while he's boasting about how great a fighter he is in the MMA circuit. They get into a bit of an argument, and this other individual, could be a male, could be a female, they're smaller and they're less of a fighter than Conor McGregor. And they push Conor McGregor. McGregor, once he gets pushed, decides that instead of retaliating, he suddenly just folds. He falls apart. He goes over to the bartender, pays off his tab, and immediately leaves the bar, saying he's just not going to deal with it, and just leaves. Now, at that moment, you come out of the bar. Your friends tell you that Conor McGregor was just here, and that he was being very brash, but, their opinion of him has dropped. They don't think he's quite as impressive as he had been before he came into the bar. You, being a fan of Conor McGregor, say, no, he's great. He's a fantastic fighter. He's really boisterous. You love this guy. And all of your friends say, well, that's not what we just saw. We just saw him back down to a little tiny person for no reason. He didn't even try and defend himself in any kind of way. He just ran away with his tail between his legs. You say, that's not the personality I've seen. That doesn't sound right. I don't believe it because I didn't see it. Well, then you look at the bar and everyone else tells you, yes, that's exactly what happened. You know what that example is? That's the Biden-Harris administration. That is exactly the same thing. If you were to put Biden-Harris administration in the place of Conor McGregor and looking at that smaller person that got into the conflict with Conor, that's the Middle East. That could be Iran, it could be Afghanistan, it could be Iraq. It's overall the Middle East and pretty much foreign policy overall. And that interaction they had is the way the rest of the world is watching the United States. The big dog in the arena, the ones who are supposed to be the champions, the great fighters for the world and for itself. And this small group, these small nations, Iran, which is not on the par with the United States in any kind of military aspect. They are the leaders of global terror in the world, but they don't have a standing army that could beat the United States. They don't have a nuclear inventory that could beat the United States. But yet, they have been having fights with the United States since 1979. This group made the Biden administration back down and run away, to lose face with the world and have no respect. And they're not the only ones who've done it. As you can see, even our friends in France, that's President Macron, are more than willing to scold the Biden administration publicly and to make them feel less than, to make the United States be less than. That is not an action of respect. Again, that's not respectful. So we have to ask the question, why does the Middle East matter? How does this all come together? Well, for those of our viewers who are younger, who may not have been alive, actually, we're sure most of you have not been alive, you're not aware. One of the reasons why Iran is a big deal goes all the way back to 1979. In 1979, it was Iran that captured several hundred Americans, and they held them, 50 Americans, for 444 days. It ruined the Carter administration. It embarrassed the United States. And that hostage taking, that crisis in Iran, set the stage from 1979 going forward, that Iran became a global leader of terror in the world. We're talking about suicide bombings. We're talking about insurgent groups. We're talking about militias that have gone around the world, not just in the Middle East, but around the world, and have killed innocent civilians. They're not targeting militaries. They target individuals. And that's kind of the way that we got to 2001. For those who are not alive, that's when we had 9/11. That's when we lost thousands of Americans in a senseless attack based on religion from the Middle East, from extremists who wanted to kill American citizens because we exist, because we're a powerful nation and we exist. We have women that go to schools. We believe in freedom and allowing people to speak and to choose their own religious beliefs, to believe whatever you want. That is an affront to groups like Iran, groups like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, like the Taliban. And so the United States decided that we wanted to go in and we wanted to stop this, which started the Afghan war, which has been going on since 2002. But about 20 years now, the United States has been in Afghanistan fighting. And that also led us to Iraq, where we continue to fight with even more extremist groups, with ISIS and with Al-Qaeda, expanding those fights. And we've also gone into Syria. Because if we don't, Iran and those extremist groups reach out to the United States and they want to kill us, regardless of your political beliefs. It doesn't matter if you're a progressive or a socialist, a libertarian, a Republican, or a conservative. They don't care. You allow America, we allow women to be able to get jobs, to drive in cars, to be able to go to school. These are things we take for granted in the United States. These are things that those groups absolutely abhor and want to destroy the United States, wipe it off of the face of the earth, according to the Ayatollah of Iran, wipe it off of the face of the earth for this horrible insult. So that sets the stage. I want you to understand. So not responding to what's going on in the Middle East is a signal for danger to the United States and to our citizens and to our friends, whether they are in Paris, in France, whether they're in England, whether they're Israel. All of our allies stand at the same risk. So that brings us a little bit forward in time. Let's look at what was going on in 2015. I'm jumping forward a bit. In 2015, we saw that Iran, again, did what it has always done. As a leader of global terror, they went out and they gave cash and arms and supplies to the Taliban to fight the United States. As it's stated here in the Wall Street Journal from July 11th, 2015, 6 years ago, when members of one of the Taliban were asked by the news media about where they were getting paid $580 a month and where they were getting their rifles and their ammunition, the answer that was given to the Wall Street Journal is that Iran is supplying them with whatever they need. Iran wanted to destroy the United States, and they have been doing so successfully. And in fact, we see that the White House supported international nuclear talks with Iran that are scheduled at that time to finish, and the world and face worldwide criticism for potentially setting up a new regional dynamic in which Tehran, Iran, unfettered by punitive economic sanctions and flush with new resources, would be able to pressure an activist agenda through its proxies in and around the Middle East. Iran's growing ties to the Taliban is another sign of that. It was Representative Ed Royce from California at the time that stated that across the region, Iran is stepping up in its support for militants and rebel groups, with billions in sanctions relief coming. That support goes into overdrive. In 2015, under the Obama administration, with Joe Biden as vice president, the United States put forth a Iran nuclear deal. Basically, the United States gave Iran money, hundreds of billions in money and sanctions, and allowed Iran to fund global terror. Now, when I say that, a lot of people, especially younger people who haven't lived through it or may not be familiar with it, may think we're being hyperbolic here. No, we're not. In July 14th of 2016, approximately 5 years ago, it was Secretary, or then Secretary, John Kerry, Secretary of State, who stated to CNBC, quote, "I think that some of it will end up in the hands of the IRGC or other entities, some of which are labeled terrorists." What is he speaking about there? He's speaking about the $150 billion in funds that had been previously frozen in international banks that were given to Iran and to be able to create the Iran nuclear deal. I want you to be very clear. He stated that some of this money went to fund global terror through Iran. Iran was putting that out. In fact, when we look at this carefully, we will also see that it was Hezbollah, which in 2016, in June of 2016, was stating that it was unfazed and that it was not afraid of the White House, the Obama administration. And its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, stated, "We are open about the fact that Hezbollah's budget, its income, its expenses, everything it eats and drinks, its weapons and rockets are from the Islamic Republic of Iran." It doesn't get more clear than that. When the United States is weak, when the United States begs for deals and gives money to Iran, the rest of the world has more global terror. Whether that's Hezbollah, whether that's Hamas in Palestine, whether it's direct actions against the United States or actions through its agents in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, it's always the same thing. International terror increases. And we have seen this consistently. And we know that under the Biden administration, there has been a resurgence of the same kind of policy and errors that occurred under the Obama administration. And we're not picking on the Obama administration because they're Democrats. We're picking on them because their policy was inefficient. And we know this because we have seen the result. When we gave money to Iran, Iran funded global terror. That is a fact. And we saw that global terror increased because Iran used that money and gave it to Hezbollah. They gave it to Hamas. They gave it to insurgent groups like Taliban and Al-Qaeda and ISIS to kill America and its allies. In fact, we were talking about this return to the Obama policy back on January 22nd, a day after this news that the United States actually entered into Syria with new troops and more troops, escalating that region in the Middle East and increasing the exposure of U.S. troops to danger. At the time, most of the American news media said it's not true. It didn't happen. But in fact, the rest of the world was watching what was going on. And the rest of the world reported and reacted. They knew. The United States went into Syria. It reignited and escalated a problem that had been going on for decades. And we know that the rest of the world wasn't sure what to think of the Biden administration. What were they going to do? But we found out that answer on March 20th. In fact, we made a video about that as well. On March 20th of 2021, this was the response we got to see from the Biden administration on its international policy. Last night, Joe Biden decided he wanted to pick a fight.
The price he's going to pay, well, you'll see shortly.
Not with China, not with North Korea. God forbid it was Iran. He decided to pick on Russia. And Vladimir Putin, for his part, said, "Sticks and stones, I dare you to say it to my face." And Joe Biden responded today, saying that he was just too busy. I can see how the world is quaking in fear. That's right. The world was quaking. They were terrified by Joe Biden stumbling upstairs, of his missteps on international policy, and creating greater tensions with both Russia and China, North Korea, as well as Iran. Which is an odd thing to do for someone who is saying that he was trying to increase more peace. And yet all of his actions led to more violence. We had China try and commit genocide of the Uyghurs, and it scolded the United States under the Biden administration, something they had not done previously under the prior president. We saw that Joe Biden picked a fight with the leader of Russia, something that the Russian leader laughed at. And Joe Biden had the image of a lack of power as he stumbled up the steps of Air Force One. It wasn't an imposing image. And we saw that the rest of the world watched that. They watched the G7 meeting. They watched allies of the United States, like Macron in France, scold our president, scold our nation. And that added up to a lack of fear, kind of like the example we made about McGregor. He was on the floor. He ran away. In that example, and in this reality, the reality is No one has respect for the United States. The rest of the world is watching what is happening and watching the missteps, watching the fumbles, watching the United States run away from every single one of the people that it's picking a fight with, whether it's China or Russia, North Korea, or Iran. And that's why we saw that Iran took the opportunity to start fighting through all of its proxies, all of the agents and insurgents that it had in Iraq and in Syria and in Afghanistan to attack the United States. In fact, we saw that the United States received a bunch of airstrikes from drones and from rockets funded directly by Iran, the very same nation that Joe Biden is trying to restart the Iran nuclear deal with again. And so the United States is shown to be weak and having poor responses, very poor responses. And the answer to that has been from the Biden administration is, well, as he said in April, the United States is going to get out of Afghanistan. The United States is going to get out of Iraq. And we're doing so with the highest speed possible. The United States is doing this, according to the Biden administration, with our tails tucked between our legs. We recently spoke about that July 2nd, that the Biden administration told the United States Army to run away from Afghanistan and the Bagram Air Base. And they did, in the middle of the night, without telling anyone what happened. We didn't tell our allies. We didn't tell the Afghan people or its military or its government. Nobody knew. We just left. And we left weapons and tanks and food that got into the hands of the Taliban, as we reported on July 6th. That means we're weak. We're scared. We're running away from Iran, someone we know we could beat. We're running away from global terrorist groups like the Taliban and ISIS and Al-Qaeda, groups that we can beat and that we have at different points in time have been beating. And instead, we see that what's happening now, Iran and Russia are jumping in to fill the void as the United States runs away, leaving no support, destroying the actual friendships and political allies that we have built up in Afghanistan and Iraq. We're destroying them under the Biden administration's absolute desire to run away. And according to The Guardian, there is a quote here from Syed Lailaz, and he mentions that, quote, the Taliban could not have survived so long without genuine political support, and they might now serve Iran's regional diplomatic interests. The Taliban are no longer the Taliban of the past. They have also realized that we must interact with the world, and we must cooperate with countries in the region. The Taliban must support and serve Iran. And that's because we're seeing the Taliban come back to power because of what Joe Biden has done. Matter of fact, let's take a look at 3 days ago. This is according to the Military Times, and a story that did not get large attention in the United States, much like the attacks a month earlier. U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria face an increasing attack, and fissures form between Iran and the militias to an extent. But we see, and this is important, Iran's Expeditionary Quds Force commander brought one main directive for Iraqi militia faction leaders long beholden to Iran when he gathered with them in Baghdad last month, June of 2021, maintain calm until after nuclear talks between Iran and the United States. Iran already has a plan. They already know what to do. They've done this before because they did it in 2015, 2016 under the Obama administration. They're waiting for the United States to give them money so that Iran can give that money to all of the terrorists in the world, to let them buy bombs and rockets and drones and use them against innocent civilians. And Iran is telling the leaders, they're telling the factions, the terrorists in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria, wait for it. Biden's going to give us the money because Biden is scared. And Biden's going to run away from you. Let him go. He's already running away. You're going to get everything you want. That should scare people right there. But it gets worse because the various militant groups, these global terrorists, they know that the United States is afraid. And so they're continuing to attack because they have no reason not to. Even if they wait, they don't have to worry because the United States is running away. The Biden administration is running away. As reported on July 10th, U.S. forces in eastern Syria took indirect damage on Saturday, but initial reports did not indicate any casualties or damage, according to the United States. The incident was the latest in a series of attacks on U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria in recent days. This includes at least 14 rockets hitting an Iraqi airbase hosting U.S. forces, wounding 2 American service members. The world knows. The Biden administration is weak. We don't respond. We don't know what to do. And we are afraid. We are running away from all of these nations and all of these battles, and we are leaving our allies in those nations and around the world to fend for themselves. We're leaving them out in the dark. Literally, in the case of Bagram Airport, we literally turned off the lights and ran away. And in doing this, we are leaving supplies, weapons, tanks for these militants to grab and to use. And this is a problem. This is a very big problem. And this is why we can see that Politico is mentioning on July 10th, 2 days ago, that the Biden administration is under pressure to respond to the escalating attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria. People want to see something done because leaving it as it is will not help. Former defense officials called on the president to be consistent in responding to the attacks. Mick Mulroy, who oversaw the Pentagon's Middle East policy during the Trump administration, noted that Iran needs to know they can't hide behind their proxy forces. But in fact, we know that is exactly what Iran is doing because Iran is not afraid. Iran knows they are winning, and the Biden administration is running as fast as they can. And there is no consistency in the response, at least not from the United States. We also found out that on July 10th, that Iran is in the middle of working out peace talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government that was initially set up by the United States. That they are currently the leaders in trying to bring peace into a region of the world that the United States formerly was helping. That Iran are the good guys, and the United States are the bad guys. And we see, as this is reported by the Tehran Times, by Iran itself, they state that their pragmatic policy to create peace was necessitated by the fact that the United States left Afghanistan without taking care about what might take place once its troops moved out of the country. After 2 decades of heavy military presence in Afghanistan, the U.S. clumsily left the country, even though its intelligence community presciently predicted that Afghanistan is susceptible to falling into the hands of the Taliban in a few months after the withdrawal of foreign troops. And what's the answer from the Biden administration? No, that's not inevitable. That's their words. As we covered it on July 11th in our live stream, the answer from the Biden administration was, it's not inevitable. You don't know that the Taliban is going to take over. You don't know that they're going to have all the power, that they're going to resurge. And on the same day that the White House was saying that through Jen Psaki, the Taliban went onto international news as the world watched, and they said, we control 85% of Iraq. Excuse me, they control 85% of Afghanistan. And Iran already knows. They're the ones who are helping them. They have been the ones funding them. They are the ones who are behind this entirely. It gets even worse. You see, if you look at today's news from NPR, the top U.S. commander in Afghanistan has relinquished his role. He has been fired. He has been removed. General Miller no longer is involved. And this is important, not only because General Miller is gone, but he is being replaced by Marine General Frank McKenzie. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a second. But according to NPR, Afghanistan's National Security Advisor, Hamadullah Mohib, who attended the handover, said the U.S. and NATO withdrawal has left a vacuum that resulted in Afghanistan's national security forces stranded on the battlefield without resupplies, sometimes running out of food and ammunition. Can you imagine that? People we have been fighting and training for 20 years, who've become allies of the United States, have now been left so much in the dark that they are on battlefields without any supplies, without any food, without any ammunition, because the Biden administration is too busy taking our troops and running away, even as our allies need help. Do you think that Iran, who's coming in saying they're going to bring peace, they're going to help you, do you think they're going to get a lot of support? Do you think some of the people who are fighting on the U.S. side might be just a little bit angry, that they might be a little vindictive, besides all of the fighters who have now come together and have experience and are absolutely angry? The Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and the ISIS fighters that have been training and fighting in the United States for 2 decades. And they want to keep fighting us. And Iran is more than happy, as they said, just wait. We're talking about the Iran nuclear deal. Give us a chance to get the money from the Biden administration, and we'll give you all the food and weapons you want to attack America and its allies. Iran is gaining prominence, and they've been planning this since 2015, as I have shown you. Iran is gaining hardened soldiers in their global terrorist fight. And these global terrorists attack Americans everywhere in the world and at our home. It's a problem. It's a big deal. And they're going to attack not just the United States. They go after our friends in France. They go after our friends in England. They go after our only true allies in the Middle East, Israel. And we're seeing that Russia is gaining power here because they're going in along with Iran to be peacemakers, saying that they will do what America did not do. They're going to bring peace to the region. We see that Pakistan, which has already supported Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and ISIS, and even gave a home to Osama bin Laden, the man responsible for the 9/11 attacks. They too are on the bandwagon with Iran. And they're more than happy to see the United States be attacked by global terrorists and to attack Israel, our friends. This is a problem. And the rest of the world is paying attention to all this. This is big news in the rest of the world, as I'm showing you from these international sources. And what they happen to be noticing is the same thing we're noticing, especially when you see that there has now been a change. The United States has been running and creating such a big vacuum that we saw General Miller was punished. He was removed from his position and thrown aside for doing what the Biden administration wanted him to do. And now there is a new person in charge, and that is going to be Marine General Frank McKenzie, and he will be the head of the U.S. Central Command. But it also tells us something very important about the Biden administration policy. It tells us that we're not going to be holding anything. See, you have Army troops to hold a position. That's what the Army does. It takes ground and it holds that ground. Marines don't do that. Marines are a spearhead. They create ground and they protect it. They are mobile. The United States Marines don't hold cities. They go in and they make attacks on the enemy and they defend from the enemy. But they're mobile. They don't hold anything, which means we have just told all of our allies in the Middle East, not only will the United States not support its allies even after 2 decades and billions of dollars, but we're not even going to have troops that are going to stand there and stand beside you. We have mobile troops that are going to be moving away. We're getting out of Dodge, and you're off all on your own without any support whatsoever. And it's not being reported because the news media, they don't want you to realize that everyone is scolding the Biden-Harris administration, that no one has respect on an international level for the Biden-Harris administration. The news media doesn't want you to understand that because they are weak, the Biden-Harris administration, that means global terror will increase. Americans will be targeted around the world, and Americans will die because of this lackluster plan of retreat. You may not think the Biden administration is bad. You may not think they're ineffective, but the answer on their international policy is yes, they are. And the world knows, and the world is paying attention, and the world is reacting. Let the news media know. Let your local elected officials know that we need to do something, and we need to create a plan that's not just run away before it takes the lives of American citizens. We may not have that chance in the future. But if you found this to be interesting and informative, we ask you to like and share, and most of all, subscribe. If you want to tell us what you think, and you think we've missed something, we misunderstood the international politics of this and what's happening in the Middle East, please leave us a comment and tell us why we're wrong, or tell us why you agree with us. And please do join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to share your voice, and make sure you subscribe so that we will be able to reach everyone in the world, to hear everyone's voice, and to have that conversation. We thank you, and we hope you will have a great day.